Hello, everyone, and welcome to another week of Wake Up Call. I am back, and this room actually originally was going to be my office, but we decided to make this my younger daughter's bedroom once she's out of a crib and out of our bedroom, and I like the way that it looks 10 times better than my office, to be honest. So I'm thinking about maybe switching over to this room. Maybe that's the whole reason why I've been not wanting to be in there, because maybe my office is supposed to be this room instead. So we'll see what happens. But this chair that I'm sitting into, this peacock chair, the Midwest is the best for getting good deals on vintage furniture. I mean, sometimes people just give us stuff for free. So most of the furniture that you see in my house is either free or very little. We get a lot of things from Goodwill, and Facebook Marketplace is also another great place, because these chairs go for, oh my God, so much money in bigger cities. It's ridiculous. So that's an advantage to being in a little town in the Midwest, because it does get boring. So these are the little things that excite me. Let's dive into some of your questions and comments. Rose asked about the young man escaping mind control from one of the episodes. You're speaking about Gray, I believe, and if you want to follow more of his work, you can find him on X. His account is @GrayAreaMonarch, like the color gray, area, monarch, all one word. And that episode that you're speaking of, I think it was episode 39. JD, hey Kristen, hope all is well. I have always thought that you're great at free flow, free thinking. Structuring what is intuitive can be a challenge at times, but we need shows like this to help wake people up and think freely, and people need help with how they can think freely. What kinds of questions do people need to ask? What do people need to remember when they are being faced with what seems like impossible choices? How can people stay human amongst all the tech? Always good to keep helping people answer these questions. Advocating for your soul in this era is one of the most difficult things you can do. I definitely agree with that, and thank you for saying my free flow, free thinking way of presenting is something that you enjoy, because it's actually what I enjoy the most too, but sometimes it doesn't always work that way, because I try to bring new information every week and really switch it up and not be repetitive. So I do better at the free flow, free thinking when it's topics that I'm very well versed in. But when I'm sort of talking about things like I will today that I am not that well versed in, but I'm willing to just go there, it has to be a little more structured. But I agree. I mean, I like my free flow, free thinking way of presenting stuff. But, as my knowledge expands, I'm sure that the free flow, free thinking style will become more regular. Devin, question, I have considered, like David has too, the possibility that this god or devil that the dark occultists worship is simply just some kind of artificial intelligence that can only be opened up, like launching an app on your phone, or to access a screen on your computer to open up ChatGPT, for example, via the rituals they do. Because if the brain is simply just the equivalent of a virtual reality headset version of a computer that is decoding information and sending it to the monitor, which would be our eyes, then without a doubt there must be icons, files, etc. that have existed inside of this dimension or construct, as well as outside of this dimension inside of other constructs that can be copied and pasted into ours and then accessed through some kind of code of worship, like chanting, nefarious dancing, nefarious behavior, murder, and all of the things that are not of the original copy and its construct. Do you think to yourself sometimes that maybe the reason why everything is so confusing and rabbit holed to the point of insanity to get us trapped in conspiracies simply because it's man that is opening up portals in time, asking a foreign construct of AI short questions and getting detailed answers, vice versa, an exchange of data. Because surely over the course of the last 5 years, there are certain roads that are unfortunately taken by researchers that have led them to insanity. They are psyops that are so clever that I have to wonder sometimes if a human is really that capable of being that intelligent to think ahead and prompt someone to believe the things that they do now. Our world or construct must be a system that is linked to another system or construct where when that other system is asked a question by someone in this system, like, for example, how do I get 3 religions to destroy themselves in a war so that my authority goes unchallenged in here? And then the other system must have generated a text that overlaps and messes with the original text. When I say text, I mean Bible. Like some kind of format that keeps things in place, like a code. What are your thoughts, Kristen? Do you think this theory is why Mormons, Freemasons, the Vatican, etc. have so many deep ties to science and the push for AI control? Well, that is a very good question, or many questions. I think that why the Freemasons and Mormons and the Vatican, etc., have deep ties to science and the push for AI control is to get us further away from the real creator and this oneness. It's to get us more separated from the true I, like David calls it. And as far as, do I think sometimes that may be the reason why everything is confusing and rabbit holed to the point of insanity to get us trapped in conspiracy is simply because it's man that is opening up portals in time, asking a foreign construct of AI short questions and getting detailed answers, vice versa. Well, I definitely think that they want everything as confusing as possible and as rabbit holed as possible because they want they want it difficult for us to get to the truth, and because the truth will set you free, right? Look at the COVID era and how so many of those people who said no to the jab, they've gone along with the whole Trump term this time around, and they have no problem with Elon Musk, a lot of them, and the whole technocracy that's rolling in. So that's a perfect example of, like, and the Q movement and stuff, of people thinking that they're on to something and that they're like the best researchers ever, and they are far from it. And yeah, I mean, it's difficult to get through the truth, but what we're going to be talking about today is some steps that I think that we can take to just access some of our higher faculties so we can get to the truth as easy as possible. James said they use philanthropy to insulate themselves from natural law or cosmic consequences. That might work to a certain extent, but I don't know how, like, if that's a guarantee that just because they use philanthropy, they dodge natural or cosmic law. I would say, even more importantly than that, they tell us what they're going to do to our faces. I think that's how they dodge their karma, is by saying, yeah, we're going to do this, and people still go along with it. That, to me, is a bigger indication of the controllers dodging natural or cosmic consequences. And last but not least, I wanted to answer Shelley's question. Have you researched John Lash Lamb? I think you're speaking of John Lamb Lash. Isn't that the way that his name's said? And Frank Jacob, Trevor Grassi, and the new discoveries underneath the Giza pyramids. The only one that I'm familiar with out of them is John Lamb Lash. because I'm pretty sure that's the way it's the last name and the middle name are reversed. But the others I'm not super familiar with, but I have heard about the new discoveries underneath the Giza pyramids. That might be something interesting to cover. Okay, so last episode I talked about the Qliphoth and the Tree of Death in Kabbalah, and I just asked myself randomly this past week, I'm like, how many dimensions are there really? Because I've heard so many different numbers thrown out there. I've heard 9, I've heard 10, I've heard 11, I've heard 12, I've heard 15, I've heard 24. So like, what is the answer? And so I was looking this week and doing research on that. And then I kind of came across the Kathara, which we're going to get into, which is supposedly the true tree of life. And I just wanted to bring up a point. What is the real reason why Kabbalists are looked at as evil? And these days, a lot of people seeking the truth associate Kabbalists and Kabbalah with evil. Because there is some truth there's a lot of truth in the Kabbalah, but I think it's important that we identify exactly why it is evil in the end, like, even if there are good parts of it, why it's overall a negative thing. And for me, basically, what I've found is the Kabbalah is inorganic. It's not the original blueprint. And when people like David talk about us being on a planet that is a bad copy of the original, it all has to do with this Kabbalist inorganic grid. Basically, what I found is it seems like they bent sound and light to get it through to this grid, and they abused the laws of multidimensional physics to create this bad copy. And so a lot of people talk about this Kathara grid, and that's the true tree of life. When I hear about this from time to time, I sort of am like, oh my God, this stuff sounds like crazy new age jargon that I just doesn't seem very grounded to me. So I kind of stay away from some of these Catharic teachings, but really, after spending a lot of time with it, I do think that there is truth in the Kathara system, or the Kathara grid being the real tree of life. So we're going to get into some of that today. So I guess I'll start with what physics says, and physics says that there's 11 dimensions. I think it was in 2018, there was a Science Alert article. I won't go through it, but basically these scientists were creating a fake replica of a real brain and then discovered that the brain works up into 11 dimensions. So that's physics, but this Kathara grid is supposedly the real system, the original eternal energy structure of creation. And with a counterclockwise Merkaba spin representing infinite life force energy. Okay, so in the Kabbalistic tree of life, they use either 10 or 11. And if you've noticed ever, anything that is around 12 but not 12 is usually not the real thing. That's why the zodiac has 12 signs, and 12 comes up a lot in matters of truth. So anytime I see the numbers 10 and 11, I do question it. And there are a lot of people who actually argue that this Katharic grid is also a scam. But from my research, I do think that there's truth to it. I just think that there are a lot of people out there who are talking about it who may not be fully educated or may have holes in their theories. But I do think overall that this is the real eternal energy structure of creation. So in Kabbalah, the golden ratio is a base 10 finite system showing energetic decay and may be a reflection of Earth's fallen state, still embodying the natural beauty, so there's still truth to it, but it's operating with a limited energy system. Okay, so this is the root of why Kabbalah is evil. Like, there might be truth to it. There might be beauty in certain aspects of it. But overall, it is a decay and death system. The golden ratio represents harmony within the material world, while the Kathara grid is more expansive, eternal, and the one that we may eventually return to. And that's why I think that this is an important conversation. Again, a lot of people know way more about this than I do, but if we're going to offset what is happening with the AI agenda, I think we're beating a dead horse if we constantly are talking about the problems and not coming up with the solutions. And I think this Kathara grid does have solutions, despite the fact that there are some figures who talk about this that might not be 100% trustworthy. And the Kathara grid and golden ratio represent two ways of understanding universal creation. One is finite and harmonic, and the other infinite and expansive. And so that's ultimately the big difference between the Kathara and the Kabbalah tree of life, is that the Kathara is infinite and expansive. The Kathara grid has 3 levels. Level 1 is the framework on which levels 2 and 3 expand upon the dynamics of the morphogenetic field. The human body connects to these grids via chakras, the energy centers that extend into the field. Ka represents light, emanation, and expression. Tha denotes sound, vibration, intention, and Ra refers to spirit of God manifesting creation. And then Kristalla means God intends, linking divine intention with the Kathara structure. This ties into the 12-point geometry of the Kathara grid, which forms a base of counterclockwise rotating Merkaba spirals. And the Amorea Merkaba is based on base 12 and base 24 scalar wave dynamics. So this is where we get the 12 and 24 dimension thing. Spirals that represent multidimensional energy flow and activation paths. Again, there are proponents for and against both the crystal Kathara grid and the golden ratio, which is in Kabbalah, and that reflects 2 different perspectives on universal energy and creation. But we talk about wanting to ascend and expand, and I don't think that we're going to get it by doing what we've done for so long. The Kathara grid serves as a template associated with Kabbalistic science and other ancient teachings describing how creation unfolds through harmonic scalar wave mechanics. The Tree of Life is actually the fallen program grid with 10 base, and Kathara grid is the 12th tree and is the true Tree of Life with geometry of Christic creation, the core structure behind our morphogenetic fields, which are the holographic template blueprints upon which all matter manifests from one base. The 10-tree grid versus the 12-tree Kathara grid. In Kabbalistic science, the difference between the 10-tree and 12-tree grids reflect the split between fallen mechanics and the organic eternal life blueprint. 10 tree grid is the Kabbalah of life, missing spheres 8, which is the center, which is the heart, and 12, which is the connection to source. It creates a closed finite system that recycles energy instead of connecting it back to source. So this is where the feeding off of our life force comes from. I mean, this is huge. This is simple. Like, this part is simple to understand. And when we call out Kabbalah, we need to call out this stuff, in my opinion. It's linked with Metatronic coding, reversal currents, and black hole fall systems. The 12-tree Kathara grid holds all 12 centers, Kathara spheres, each representing DNA strand templates. So this is also where the 12-strand DNA idea comes from. Chakra centers and higher dimensional identity structures. It provides the organic map of creation, connecting all the way back to the eternal source field. And it supports 12-strand DNA activation, healing, and true ascension mechanics. So, if you're looking to get into this with activating your DNA and whatnot, my suggestion is just do your research on who is guiding you through this or doing the meditations or whatever, because I think that ultimately this is an inside job, but you are gaining information in the process of all of this, and you just want to make sure that you're getting your information from a trusted source. Back to my question on dimensions. Are we dealing with 11 dimensions or 15 or 12 or whatever? Again, the Kabbalah only has 10 or 11 points. Why? Because like the Fibonacci number and the flower of life, it is rooted in base 10 mechanics. Everything under base 11 going downwards is distorted and reversed. So every time we talk about this distortion and reversal, this is where it comes from. This is why they invert everything. It's based in this. The Kathara grid, crystal spiral, and God seed, however, operate under direct alignment with God's source consciousness. The crystal spiral begins at the center point, and long story short is anything that is 10 or 11 or under in nature when it comes to this kind of stuff is going to be parasitic in nature. It cannot survive without a host. It needs to consume life force from other living organisms in order to sustain itself. And a lot of our world operates on this 10 or 11 system. So there's definitely, for me, like 12 is an important number. 7 and 12 are important numbers to pay attention to. There's definitely a connection between the Kathara and our chakras and our planets, which I've talked about at length, the constellations, harmonics, mathematics, sacred geometry, which all can be observed through various cultures and religions and belief systems across the globe. So ultimately, this Sephirot of the Kabbalah, or Tree of Life, may have been manipulated to keep humanity stuck in this loop and stuck in the reincarnation trap and not being able to ascend. All has to do with this fake blueprint that they created based off of this. The grid points were left empty, shifted, reversed, or misrepresented. So again, like the heart center missing on the Tree of Life, that is a huge sign something is wrong, in my opinion. So for me, what resonates is that the Kathara Tree of Life really mirrors the Western zodiac, and each star constellation has influence on us as we move through the months of the year, which is the seasons and their elements and it moves in sync with the zodiac. So to me, that's a sign that it's likely legitimate. But again, I've listened to a lot of people on this Kathara tree of life, and there are some people out there that I just don't completely trust. So just be careful when you're getting this information. I think there's a lot of truth to it, but you have to be careful when you're sifting through it. One person I would recommend listening to about this stuff, if you're more interested in what I'm speaking about, is Ellen Red. She was on the show a few weeks ago. Maybe it was like 2 months ago, something like that. But she knows a ton about this. And I would say that she's somebody who I would trust more than some of the other people out there on this topic. So basically, I think that there's something to all of this. I think that if we want to ascend, we have to understand how mathematically this system works, basically. So we can transcend through that knowledge and understand how the dimensions actually work. So basically, what this all boils down to is that we have stargates within our body. Like, yes, we talk about stargates on the planet, but within our body, we also have stargates, and through raising our consciousness, that's how we can get to other dimensions, basically. I mean, this is actually not complicated at all. It's pretty simple, but we have to be talking about it, because if we're sitting around complaining about politics all day and not talking about this stuff, we're not going to get to where we want to go. So I think that this conversation needs to be had. And again, somebody like me, who I'm just kind of learning about this. I mean, I've known about it on the lighter end, but like I'm really trying to sink my teeth in it and take it to the next level. And I just think that we need to be talking about how we're gonna transcend. How is this gonna happen? And this Kathara grid does seem to have the blueprint, I think. So let's get into some more of the differences between the Katharic tree of life and the Kabbalistic tree of life. The Kathara is the light within. It's more Gnostic in thought, kind of. It's direct connection to the self, and there's nothing or no seeking outside the self for ascending. Whereas that Kabbalistic thought emphasizes that the Lord or something outside oneself is going to reward or punish you. Okay, so when I talk about, again, why Kabbalah is not what it's cracked up to be, and why, if we're going to call it out, we have to point these things out specifically, where the flaws are, this is where it is. Like, emphasizing that the Lord or something outside oneself is going to reward or punish you, especially on non-believers. So all of the religions that kind of frown upon other religions, that all kind of comes from this. And promises of salvation, it's like, oh, you're going to have an eternal afterlife if you worship the Lord, kind of thing. Whereas the Kathara Emerald Order is the law of one, and there's no hierarchy regardless of one's choices. It's a path of learning and evolution, emphasizes responsibility, and is related to cause and effect. In the Kathara, it's about growth. This is very important. This is another thing that very much resonated with me. It's about growth and expansion or retraction. And there are no rewards for self-sacrifice or giving your life to the Lord, let's say. There are no punishments, but there are results in the choices that you make, of either evolving or de-evolving. And the free will is linked to the choices and outcomes. Okay, so let's talk about the origin of the tree of life. Kabbalah talks about the conception of the soul and how it comes into the body. When a person reaches full realization, it is the soul, is what they say. And Adam in Kabbalah, as in Adam and Eve, is looked at as someone who we have to embody, but also fix his sins. Like, why would another human have to fix the sin of Adam in order to ascend? None of that makes sense whatsoever, okay? And sin is pleasure for one's own delight as opposed to bringing contentment to the Creator. So it's about that, like, doing things because God says so. How to correct sin. The soul must drop the degree. This is where I talk about duality a lot. This is where duality technically is unnecessary, but the way that our system works is designed this way, so there's truth to it, but it doesn't have to be this way. So how to correct sin. The soul must drop to the degree of descent and detach from the Creator. So basically that saying of hitting rock bottom, the human must basically hit rock bottom in order to ascend, which we do see that happen a lot in life. And there is kind of truth to that. And I remembered last episode, I said something about, I feel like the controllers of this realm almost have us struggle. So we learn these lessons, like it's all done on purpose. But it doesn't have to be that way. This is something that a false construct that they created, because we don't have to be so synced into duality in order to ascend. That is not the truth, but that's sort of the way that it works here by design. So what else do they teach about the tree of life that I personally do not agree with? That the soul is the highest form of man and the body is sinful. The lowest point of consciousness is necessary to experience awakening. Again, we do see this happen. It sort of is the truth, but it doesn't have to be. They've designed it that way on purpose. Adam represents sin, and we're made in his image and in the image of God. So why is the image of God sinful? That doesn't make sense whatsoever either. All of this is infiltration and control, and we shouldn't be responsible for what Adam did, okay? I think I mentioned it in the beginning, but I'm going to mention it again just in case. The Christos spiral and the Kathara verse, the Fibonacci in Kabbalah, and the Sephirot. The Christos spiral emerges from the central point of creation constantly expanding. The Fibonacci emerges from a point of adhesion. Listen to this. It is connected to something already living. It sustains itself through consumption. It has to destroy something to sustain. Judgment is one of the pillars of Kabbalah, which means someone or something is controlling the system. Okay? So in Kathara, there is no judgment. It's you make a decision and this is going to be the reaction. This is going to be the result. It's that simple. The right is masculine and the left is feminine, and together in the middle they join or become one. The Christic teachings, on the other hand, emphasize that there is no hierarchy. The only difference lies in the degrees of awareness and how well the soul knows itself, as well as how close it comes to the true Creator. So we can talk about all day long how we're going to escape the matrix and even the mathematics and geometry and whatever of all of this stuff. But ultimately, like, it really is about resonance and knowing yourself. And and constantly expanding your consciousness, it's that simple. It's really that simple. That's how we get out. But I do think that this information is really important because, again, people talk about how the Kabbalah is evil, but why? Why is it? And the answers are here. The path of evolution or devolution and the middle path is the static path and does not evolve or devolve. The evolution is based on the steps the soul takes to achieve freedom. The path of devolution is unnatural to the soul. So this is a very stark difference between the Kabbalistic tree of life and the Kathara. In the Kathara, it is unnatural for the soul to descend. You're supposed to be constantly growing. There's no going backwards. Whereas in the Kabbalah, it's like, oh, well, you can't go forwards unless you take 10 steps backwards. Hello? Like, that is so wrong. And again, I think that that's exactly why the controllers of the world act the way that they do. Some of them might actually believe their BS, but some of them might know exactly what they're doing, and they know that this is exactly how to hijack the system. All of this devolution and dark night of the soul stuff that I talk about, it really doesn't have to be this way. So when did all of this distortion happen? It's debated, really it was about 10,000 years ago, let's say. The exact number, some people speculate, but ultimately the original angelic humans were duped by these Anunnaki, and I think in some ways we evolved in terms of language and in terms of science maybe, but as far as like a spiritual perspective, we completely de-evolved because we fell for their tricks essentially. So recently, one of the listeners, Brittany, asked me, what do you think about evolution? And this is what I think about evolution. I think that our DNA was manipulated and we spiritually definitely regressed. But there were certain things that the Anunnaki did give us. I mean, I think that we didn't really have language before that. So now we're hearing all of this stuff about ascension and all of this new age woo-woo stuff. So again, just be aware of who you're listening to when it comes to Catharic meditations and information on this, because there seems to be a little infiltration happening, but there is a lot of truth. So it's just you're going to have to kind of sift through it on your own and see who resonates with you. But ultimately, this information is going to be coming from within anyway. You just need to be slightly guided in the right direction, and then you're on your way, I think. Rising above this dualistic programming that we are so accustomed to, which I think all of us struggle with, is going to be huge for us, I think, in the years to come, in order to escape the matrix. And they keep us caught in this dualistic trap, and that's basically what Kabbalah is. Again, why is it evil? It's like duality in and of itself might not be purely evil, but it keeps us separated, which is what they want. So I think it's really important for us to understand this better. I'm trying to speak on it as simply as possible, because again, this is not really my area of expertise, but I am trying to understand it better. And through this upgrade of our DNA, we can offset a lot of the things that they have planned for us. And instead of arguing about politics or talking about things that we can't really change. This is something we can do, and this is something we can change. And even if you have questions around this, if it's legitimate or not or whatever, we need to have open discussions about this. And I think that we should be teaching one another about it. So you've probably heard, if you're familiar with all of the stuff that I'm talking about, you've probably heard of Ashayana Dean. She was sort of like, I think it was in the 90s maybe. She was kind of the first one to talk about this heavily. She definitely, watching her old videos, there are certain things that I definitely resonate with, but then there are other things I'm like, oh, I'm not exactly sure if I trust her 100%, but she's sort of the most well-known person when it comes to the Kathara, and there are plenty of other people out there who do know what they're talking about and have good intentions around all of this, but ultimately you're going to have to be the one to do the research, and I think that we got to keep the conversation moving, and we got to actually do something about upgrading our DNA and going back to our true blueprint in order for us to get to where we need to go. So hopefully that all made sense, and I will see you guys next week.